ground floor of BBPC to I debated this one for any people.
Yeah.
Hello. In a world where people are dying of starvation, in a world where the homeless can't find enough homeless shelters, enough space in homeless shelters, in a world where people don't get enough money from their welfare packages to have 3 meals in a day, we think it's immoral for governments to deny people a reasonable quality of life for a risky deal in investing and putting in funds to fund these companies that are not immediately beneficial towards the human condition. What does this mean? This means the government should stop funding NASA, ISRO, other maybe deep water exploration, maybe other deals that are not like beneficial towards like the contemporary human nature, like health care or education, or like increasing welfare, increasing the disposable income towards the poor, right? We think like in this current scenario where people dying of poverty, like we have not enough schools, not enough hospitals, that they are underfunded. We think this is a risky deal, right? Because like oftentimes when you talk about space exploration, when you talk about maybe deep water exploration, you are always dealing with something that is unsure, that you are putting a lot of money into a deal that you just can't place a figure on the return of investment, right? And oftentimes you're not sure of how much money these kind of ventures will actually bring back. You're unsure of how much benefits and whether these benefits are tangible towards the people in the long run as well, right? You are not sure of whether there is you're not sure of the timeline, you're not sure of the results. Because in these forms of ventures, there are not many set goals, right? Which is why like you call products and technologies that are generated as a byproduct of NASA technology, you call them what's that term for it? Spillover technology, because those are just like the side missions that don't really achieve the initial goals. So we think this deal is inherently risky. We don't think it's a good deal. But at the core of it, there's also this discussion that we need to have, right? Why is it important for the government to prioritize short-term benefits for the people instead of potential long-term benefits that probably all would want to talk about when you invest or when you fund in this space venture or deep water, deep sea venture, right? We think the first reason is that when you talk about short-term benefit, you're talking about a determinate pool of people, right, who are alive, who voted your current government in, who pay taxes every year, right? So we think, as opposed to like an indeterminate number of people in the future we are not sure what condition it is. We think as the government of the people who currently voted you in, we think it's right and we think it's just that you prioritize this group of people for this immediate period of time, and prioritize their interests. But secondly, sit down. There's also. Secondly, it's also the problem of uncertainty when it comes to the long-term benefits, right? Where you're just unsure of how much returns or what kind of benefits that you can get, right? As opposed, we think the comparative on our side, when the government prioritizes the short-term benefits, for example, increasing welfare, putting in money into education or healthcare, we think these are guaranteed benefits, right? Because for example, $100 will work wonders for a poor person, an additional $100 in welfare for a poor person works wonders, right? That means an extra 2 weeks of groceries, maybe, right? An extra week of rental, or maybe paid a new set of clothes where it increases your likelihood of getting employment and all that kind of thing. But if you look at the millions and billions that the US government puts into NASA funding, there is no tangible benefit that the everyday people you see are actually experiencing, right? Maybe you get some form of excitement when the countdown starts, and then you get a bit more excitement when the rocket takes off. But that's about it. That's a television show and everything. But you get satellite TV maybe as a result of space exploration, which comes to my third and final point, right? Which is, if space exploration was indeed beneficial, and we've probably seen some form of benefits like satellite stuff and satellite imaging, GPS and stuff like that, we think it's better that private sector handles it without the involvement of the government.
Following your logic that governments only have an obligation to voters right now, then would you not also invest in things like green technology, for example?
Yeah, if it's immediately beneficial. If it right now, it will improve your quality of life for the people, sure. But if it's long term, if it's space exploration, that kind of thing, then no lah, right? So we think private sector is better able to handle these investments into this space exploration or this kind of unimmediately beneficial things, because number one, they are more efficient, right? Because we think there's always this profit incentive, which means they drive down costs, right? They find ways to innovate and to make things more sleek, make their maybe their production or their team better and more efficient. But we also think that it's more important that the government doesn't bear the risk of this venture. That if it's we think it's important that the government doesn't bear risk, that the private sector does this at its own volition. It doesn't risk the money that can be used to help poor people and people who are vulnerable. Prop 2.
Okay, that requires a speech, not a call on the competition.
I think the world that Wesley tries to paint is one that is very bleak, and I don't think it's a world where it's very hopeful for you to live in. But I think in a world where we give governments the choice to invest in businesses that may or may not benefit us in the future, but we think it's likely for it to benefit in the future. But secondly, we think that will also have other spillover small benefits to the people. We think we must still invest. We must still allow government bodies to invest in this. What do you prefer on the outside of the house? Two things. The first is we support government bodies investing in these businesses. We can have things like PPI, public-private initiative, where government bodies work together with SpaceX to get better technology for like SpaceX exploration. But the second thing we would have is also we think investments in welfare and other like governmental institutions won't change. Because what are the governments that we're talking about when we talk about SpaceX exploration, when we talk about these industries? We tell you that the governmental bodies that we talk about are often first world developed countries. You're leading and diverse economies with strong welfare programs, strong educational programs. Examples of this is like perhaps US, the biggest economy in the world, with like technical expertise from NASA, and like therefore they are able to sustain the investment, but also maintain a good welfare program and sustain the good living people. So it's unlikely for countries like Zambia or Cambodia to invest in these industries anyway because they don't have money. So let's just get that over. So one point of rebuttal before I move on to my two substantive in my speech. The first point is that Wesley comes up here and tells us that the government's obligation is ultimately towards people now and towards not towards the people in the future because they're the ones that voted the government in. The first thing we say is that we completely disagree because your obligation is to the state and the people and the future children of your people, right? That's why we still care about things like giving education to children even though they don't vote, because we understand that they are the future generation that will one day take over our country. Therefore, we must take care of the future generation that will someday take over our country. But secondly, following that logic, they wouldn't also invest in things like green technology for like climate change, for example. And we think that's fundamentally bad because it harms your people in the end when your world is like polluted with air pollution and unable to breathe. We think fundamentally this type of technologies, although they only have long-term benefits, those long-term benefits are necessary for individuals and humankind to sustain their life in the future. So two arguments in my speech. The first is that why the participation of government shows the prosperity of these industries, and secondly, why these industries exclude benefit that no other industries have. So first argument, why is it that the participation of governments are necessary? The first is where we draw parallels to more government seeking control of other industries. Like for example, in Malaysia, Khazanah owns Petronas because they want to invest in natural resources, in oil, because they understand that A, the government bodies can also make a profit, but B, there are also long-term benefit in terms of giving people more jobs, or ensuring that a robust industry is being able to build in the future. So why is it that this industry specifically that governments must have control of? The first we would say is that we need to have governments, we need to give governments the first movers advantage in terms of controlling these industries, right? What does this mean? It's things like, for example, when governments invest money into these industries, they're more likely to be, these industries are more likely to be accountable because governments have huge say in terms of being able to control the prices of these industries, being able to control the sharing of technology that happens within these industries. Contrast that to under their side of the house, where it's a full private investment, right? Whatever corporation that succeeds, for example, maybe Tesla succeeds, they are able to monopolize technology because they are able to patent technology, for example, or B, they are able to control prices because there's no competition, there's higher barrier of entry to these industries. Ultimately, we think no, thank you. Industries become more accountable under our side of the house. But secondly, we would say that governments can tailor government institutions to tailor to this industry specifically. It's things like, for example, perhaps governments can change the educational system to churn out more professionals that are able to work within these industries in public schools. Maybe they can incentivize these corporations to create factories within their states, within their rural areas, to create more jobs for individuals. We think ultimately that can create short-term benefits, short-term marginal benefits that individuals can also benefit from. But thirdly, we say that governments can ensure other investments from private institutions. No, thank you. The reason why is because when governments invest in something, oftentimes it seems as though it's a safe investment. It's seen as profitable, therefore more likely that more investments would come into these industries. The last Okay, but then we say that governments are good decision making when it comes to this investment. The first is that governments have data; they are able to see projections and see how these industries are going to do in the future. But secondly, governments are accountable to its people. They are answerable to the people. They are democratically elected. They have to justify how much money they are spending. They have to justify why is it that this industry is succeeding. Ultimately, this industry will become far more accountable for sure.
So US has a sizable homeless population. Funding these bodies oftentimes also means funding paychecks of the top executives for really unguaranteed results. You widen the wealth gap. Is that justified?
I think you can like rearrange your budget anyways. Like for example, maybe US can spend less on your military, but it doesn't have to come at the expense of this industry because it ultimately helps the people as well. So why is it that this industry gives us specifically? It's things like, for example, reverse engineering technology. For example, when we wanted to go to the moon, we were forced to create microchips so that we could create like rockets to go to the moon. We are forced to create like artificial intelligence for that. We can have technology for us to go to that extent. The technology you have then, you are able to use for your phones, you are able to use for your laptops, and that also ultimately creates small marginal benefits for the people. But lastly, we'll say, the long-term benefit that we might have is also huge and humongous, right? In the case of pollution, for example, maybe the humankind can finally move to Mars and not care about the Earth anymore. We think that fundamental benefit that we might have is key for humankind. We must invest in these industries.
Right, I think the legal position and space recycle.
Okay.
Chair, I think it's quite ironic that the Mars rover that we spent billions of dollars sending to Mars is called Curiosity. Because Curiosity has non-ironically been complicit in killing millions of cats and metaphorically as humans. Because that's the same amount of money that could have gone in terms of examining actual policies and improving education and healthcare for people, as opposed to examining red rocks. In my speech, I'm going to talk about particularly why the kinds of expense that you have to place into this technology is just not a rational cost-benefit analysis for governments to make. And I'll extend further in talking about why these long-term benefits aren't very likely to be. So the first, a couple of responses. Now, I think in terms of green technology, right? So that was a principal question as to whether or not we will be investing in green technology. And the first thing to point out here is that the environment and the problems related with the environment has immediate impact on people right now, which means a lot of the policies that we place in order to protect the environment, i.e. carbon catalytic converters, the carbon tax, using renewable energy because oil will run out in like the actual, in our literal lifetimes, are all things that have immediate impacts, right? These aren't necessarily long-term impacts that in fact aren't confirmed to begin with. These are likely to be more confirmed to begin with, and it's within people's immediate lifetime. So I think green technology can still be justified if there is some kind of green technology, i.e. we all know that the Earth is going to die, so we are going to go explore space to find a new Earth because there's no saving this Earth. I think that would be something that we immediately oppose, right? Because that would happen in the long term. Secondly, where does this debate happen, right? Because they suggest that this debate happens only in first world developing countries. Therefore, the kinds of harm that's associated to people in poverty is low. So the first response to this is that it's not true that only first world developing countries have organizations that go do deep sea exploration and have a space research. Like India has a space research organization. It's called the ISRO that spends huge amounts of money while millions of people are dying of poverty in India and don't have access to basic sanitation. I think that's pretty abhorrent as well. But additionally, even if this is about the United States or France, Germany, like they still spend billions of dollars while not having a solid healthcare system that can cover like millions of people to be able to give them actual decent healthcare, right? So I think these are still trade-offs that they make that render the quality of lives of individuals to be even worse. The reason why the government shut down the Apollo program after a few attempts at the moon landing is because it was too expensive and they could invest the money elsewhere, right? I think we go down that path again. Like principally, it's just not giving as much returns, and the government itself has realized this a while back. Let's lastly, in rebuttal, talk about accountability. Because largely, I think I can agree that it's a bit more accountable. Maybe. I mean, some governments are corrupt. You make some public-private partnership, there can be corruption as well. I'm not going to get into that. But let me concede first. Now, maybe it can be it can be more accountable. But why do I care? Like, you can make a really, really shit industry accountable, and it's not going to matter to me, right? If it's really not going to be giving returns, I don't care if it's a bit more accountable. If at the point in which SpaceX somehow miraculously finds monetizable technology that makes them that actually improves the human condition beyond being able to commercially create passenger jets and fly people to the moon, I think at that point in time, the likelihood of that happening is quite low. And B, the patent laws that we have don't extend for a very long time to begin with, right? We have capped on patent laws up to 20 years. And even if they achieve this amazing invention that helps the human condition, I think governments are well and truly capable of adopting the invention or stealing the invention to begin with. I think it's morally justifiable to do so. I think they are quite able to do so as well, even if we do find the technology, right? So in conclusion, the industry may do better through government support and funding and incorporation into the education system, but the industry in and of itself is not worth the investment because of the vast majority of wastage that goes in, right? So that's why I'm going to add in further. Because the cost-benefit analysis just does not make sense, right? Imam pointed it in a speech and would struggle to point to it in a speech of all the things that have been created as a result of these spin-off technologies, these small benefits that we've achieved, is because there aren't many that are useful. One of these is this ballpoint pen that was created in space, right? Not particularly useful to me because I can use gel pens or pencil. The point is there aren't as many, right? But the problem with this is that the money that we spend trying to attain this technology is always in the billions, right? Always in billions and billions of dollars. And I think if that is true, then the returns are just never worth it. And that's the trend analysis showing us that it's not worth it. So even if theoretically it's possible to gain some kind of benefit in the long run, it's not wise and rational and fair and moral for governments to invest in that theoretical benefit when the practical outcomes just don't show any sort of benefits, right? But this is where they did not respond to Wesley's argumentation. Given that the risk to reward ratio is very low for governments, then the only corporations that are should then capitalize on this industry is private corporations, right? SpaceX, let them do it privately. If and truly if there is so much of money to be made out of these industries, then plenty of private corporations will go in. The only reason we have SpaceX going in now is because they want to monetize being able to fly people to the moon and monetize being able to send satellites to space, right? Again, not particularly important to improving the human condition in general. I think that can be sort of set aside for any particular reason. Lastly, I'm going to extend further and talking about why it's particularly harmful for the environment in particular, and why, in terms of being able to invest in these industries to begin with, right? And I don't want to understate why generally being able to invest in space exploration has huge impacts on the environment. The amount of money that we spend in creating rockets that use huge amounts of fuel and release huge amounts of carbon emissions, and the industry in itself releasing huge amounts of carbon emissions is likely to do more detriment to the lives of individuals on Earth right now than all the collective benefits that can be achieved in the next 50 to 100 years, right? So I think that in and of itself is not fair, because the environmental impact can literally kill people who can't live decent lifestyles because of the air that they currently breathe. I think the green technology that we invest in is perfectly fine. For all those reasons, we are happy to propose.
Yes. I mean, curiosity did kill the cat, but I think Curiosity, the rover, also told us that there was life on Mars, that there was water on Mars. It told us the possibility of lives out there somewhere in the universe. I think that it's also meant to recognize how futile we are in this world. I think fundamentally, it's important for governments to be interested in these new industries, because I think the opening government was fair in suggesting that there are immediate benefits to the human condition right now if we were to invest in education and welfare. But I think there must also be a recognition of the possibility of benefits if these investments were to succeed. What could possibly happen to humans if these investments succeed, and whether or not it's worth it to spend billions in these industries, because given the cost of success and how beneficial those successes are, we think that governments must have a stake in these industries. So I have one argument. I'm going to explain why public participation is absolutely key in ensuring growth of these industries and ensuring higher likelihood of success, because I think that it's not enough to rely on the private sector, because I think that private sector also has some limitations in capital, some limitations in technical expertise. I think that with cooperation with states, I think that they can do it far better. I think that it's likely our work would be much more preferable. But I think before that, let's just clarify two things. I think that this will also directly engage with opening government. Firstly, we're not going to be okay with extended poverty towards individuals, right? I think that reasonably governments can recalibrate their budgets to care for the poor and also somehow investing in this business. But even if to an extent there is a harm immediately to people with less welfare and less education, we are perfectly happy to accept that. Because I think that the cost is that, like, we will have the ability to go to Mars and reverse engineer technology that comes from SpaceX to immediately benefit the humankind. I don't know. GPS allows us to be able to triangulate our locations. Microchips allows us to create computers that are far more efficient, that allows access for information towards the poor, or lasers allows us to be able to triangulate and allows us to develop radiation and plasma technology. I don't know, I'm just making things up. But recently, I think that reverse engineering can still exist. I think that that's far more preferable. But I think secondly, it's also about how these governments are likely going to invest, because I think the immediate harm that was presented by opening government is that it's risky. Yes, it is risky, but I think that the investments will still be accountable anyway. I think that generally governments have access to data that allows them to see projections about how these industries are going to look like. They can network with the private sector to ensure that there's a likelihood of success when it comes to investing in these industries. They can recalibrate their education system to ensure sustainability if these industries were to succeed. I see that as a good thing. But secondly, if you're going to invest 10 billion in NASA, I think you have to explain that to the voters. I think that voters have to be you have to justify to voters why are you spending $10 billion in NASA. I think that reasonably governments can find reasons to justify. I think that generally there will be some public discussion in terms of whether or not these businesses are worth it. I think that reasonably we can expect governments to be able to recalibrate those budgets in accordance to what the public would have wanted this business to do. So I think that reasonably, I think the public will still be able to benefit. But before that, yes.
So if the only way you can get companies to be accountable is to fund them and invest in them, why the fuck we need audit departments? Why the fuck we need accounting firms for?
Okay, we are not saying that we can keep them accountable because of their bad auditing. We are keeping them accountable because we have a stake in these industries. We can prevent them from becoming monopolies. We can prevent them from hiking up prices if these industries were to be successful. We can ensure that technologies can be accessible to the general masses if these inventions were to succeed in the future. I think that governments having a stake, because they are likely going to own 20%, they are likely going to have people managing these industries, they are likely going to own and become the decision makers in some of those companies, will ensure that these people and the corporations that are involved in these industries becoming more accountable. I think we are talking about that, not bad accounting. So I think that you need to listen message. So firstly, why we think that public participation is key in growing these industries. I think that it's important to recognize what capital and what technical expertise do governments hold in these sectors. I think that primarily NASA has a lot of experience, right, with dealing with space exploration. They have sent multiple telescopes to the moon, to space. They have gone to the moon. They have gone to, I don't know, somewhere away from the solar system. I think that reasonably they're able to transfer down this technical expertise to companies that they can invest. I think that reasonably they can help SpaceX like enter economies of scale so that SpaceX will be far more efficient in delivering their products, right? Given the fact that they have access to far more capital to be able to ensure that they can like monetize these industries far more effectively, given the fact that they have more money, they have more technical expertise. I think that reasonably we can achieve the crossover time far quicker. Instead of in their world, you need 30 years to go to the moon. I think that reasonably with government spending, we can reduce it to 5 to 10 years, given that we have more capital and more people involved in those industries. I think that the ability for us to achieve the crossover time becomes more effective. I think it's that. But second, it's also about recognizing what the immediate benefits to those industries locally can do to people. For example, what happens if governments have a stake? People are likely going to think that these industries are important. Governments are forced to tailor their education system to churn out graduates that are proficient in space exploration, proficient in deep sea exploration, and these people are likely going to work in these sectors, allowing for more technologies to be discovered far quicker. But second, is that with the perception that governments are investing in those businesses, private sector are also going to join in because they know it's a safe investment because governments themselves are investing. So I think that more people are likely going to think space exploration is a worthy cause. They're likely going to put more money into those industries. But thirdly, just the creation of jobs, because I don't know, these businesses would be forced to expand. They will have to create factories that employ people locally. They will have to ensure that more people have access to this technology for them to benefit financially. I think that generally that would mean more people have access to spillover tech right now, and more jobs can be created as a result, and governments will likely have more money as a result of investing in those industries to begin with. Never been proud to lose.
Alright, I think we are all that speech now. We hope that the government
I think government should not be allowed to constantly make bad investments, right? Despite all the trend analysis that OG has talked to you about, I don't think we should allow government to constantly make bad investments and choose to deprioritize other issues that are more pertinent and more important at that point in time, right? What has been said in this debate so far? OG told you that these investments are more likely to have little to no utility values, and oftentimes these deals are very risky. And it requires government to prioritize short-term benefits over potential long-term benefits, right? To some extent, we agree with that, but I will tell you later how we will differ from OG. Well, OO came to you and said that these potential long-term benefits are necessary for humans in order for them to have better livelihood in the future. Things like, I don't know, maybe if you explore space or explore deep sea now, somehow, somewhere, the marginal benefits will accrue in the future and your children will
have better lives. We don't think that's how it works. They also talk to you about it's very important for government to be able to have first movers advantage in this industry so that it won't be a monopoly, so that people won't even sell this technology at high price in the first place, even if the benefits accrue, right? The point is, and our response to that is that it's not important in the first place. That's why there is this moral dilemma in the first place. The benefit has been proven in the future, even if there are benefits, it's not going to be that significant, or it's not going to benefit a lot of people, and the utility value to it is not even big in the first place. That's why there is this moral dilemma in the first place. Therefore, they have this additional burden put on them to explain to us why is it impossible for government to take on this moral dilemma, considering the fact that these investments are risky. Oftentimes, they don't even have return of investment in the first place. What are the deadlock that exists in this debate until now? We think that number one of the biggest deadlock is what are these utility values, and are they really important? And secondly, how do these government-linked bodies even work, and how do they even work, and why, if you choose to prioritize bad investments, you're going to harm more people on the ground in the first place? We'll be the first team to tell you one of two things, right? Number one, what are these utility values and why is it insignificant? Because insofar that how the debate has been evolving, I think the only utility value you've heard is that, oh, if you explore space, you got microchip technology, your phones will be better, you will have better microwaves for your kitchen. What does this tell you? This tells you that only privileged people can have access to these marginal benefits in the first place. That will be in my first extension. Secondly, how do government utilize government-linked bodies? Because oftentimes government use these bodies to fill in gaps where they otherwise couldn't fill, to take on projects that most private companies wouldn't even take because they don't see profit that comes out of it. And how it will be ultimately affected if you keep on taking bad investments in the future, right? First extension, the utility that you have from this investment is very limited, and sometimes there's no utility at all. It's not just this uncertainty that's scary, it's the fact that sometimes, and a lot of time, there are no benefits that come out from it. And even if any benefit is present, mostly these benefits are only accessible to people in position of privilege. So what benefit can you derive from space exploration? What benefit you can derive from space exploration don't usually concern the average voter, right? People who are marginalized, people who are economically incapable of supporting their families, for example. For example, the development in space technology evolved kitchenware. You have better materials that you can make your pots and pans from. The inclusion of microwave in household, for example, better material for your cars. What does this accrued marginal benefits tell you? It tells you that number one, you have to be privileged enough to actually enjoy these benefits. You have to be privileged enough to have a functioning house with a functioning kitchen, with a functioning microwave, or you have to be rich enough to be able to own a car that can actually utilize this technology, because oftentimes these technologies are expensive in the first place. Therefore, number one, we think it's unlikely for people on the ground to be able to benefit from whatever potential benefit that they're trying to bring, right? Because the utility value is not even large in the first place. Secondly, I think it's enough reason for you to tell the government that you should deprioritize these issues because the return of investment is just not worth it, right? Thirdly, we don't see how you can solve problems by selling solution only to wealthy people, and we don't see how your accrued benefit, your investments, your billions in investment can work and be considered efficient if you only sell the solution and if only wealthy people can afford this solution. Right? What is the impact of this extension? Number one, you will spend millions of dollars to provide minimal outcomes, right? Only benefit the middle class or people who are privileged enough to enjoy this benefit. Secondly, you allow people to constantly scapegoat on your best investment, right? This is where we differ from Uji, because if you make bad investment constantly, it's more likely for people to be able to scapegoat on that to remove more important policies and etc. For example, you propagate this idea that just because you don't consider the margin when making large decisions that are costly and expensive, therefore you are not a good government. You are giving opportunists an avenue to score cheap political points on, to constantly attack that just because you make bad investments, therefore you cannot deliver as government. Second extension is that how do government bodies work? Government bodies always fill in gaps where government cannot come in, right? I think that's a perspective that's been missing in this debate. Sit down. Government bodies like GLCs, for example, accept tenders that otherwise wouldn't be taken by private companies. For example, that's the reason why the Malaysian government bail out a lot of companies and turn them into GLCs, because otherwise private companies won't take in tenders that they don't see as profitable. Therefore, we will not have things such as more efficient public transportation, for example. Government utilize them by making them take projects that otherwise will go unnoticed, right? The government role as a conclusion to this, right, the government role is not to take on investment that are edgy, that are new, that are innovative, right? The government role is, if they were to make investment, is to always take an investment that is beneficial to the people. In this case, I don't know, probably bail out more company, create more GLCs that is going to take projects that's going to benefit people in the future, right? We think it's a zero-sum game. If government-linked bodies were to fund more R&Ds, more research that are insignificant to humankind, you also take the money from other places that can otherwise be used to improve livelihood of the people, right? Because now, number one, you allow government to make bad investment and affect a lot of people's lives in the process. The impact to this extension is this. Number one, we think government should not care about the first movers advantage in these industries, because government is not, number one, motivated by capitalism and making money and making profit in the first place, right? We think that even if you want to have that first movers advantage, even if you want to create competition so that it won't be expensive, it's not the role of the government. It's the role of these corporations in the first place, right? Secondly, we think government should always choose investment or policies that are more aligned with the moral of being a government, right? That you are there to invest money that are from your taxpayer and you should benefit a lot of people. And secondly, you're voted and democratically elected. We don't see why you need to make bad investments on behalf of the people.
I think what's been missing of today's debate is that a proper characterization of what today's economy looks like, right? So government keeps coming out and asking for these socialist handouts. They want to give more welfare, they want to give more benefits, so on and so forth, right? But here's the problem. There is no purely socialist state in today's world, right? What exists? There exists a free market mechanism built on capitalist theories where the government is present as an industry player and therefore it forms a mixed economy. So here's the thing. At the point in which you refuse to recognize that capitalist mechanisms play an integral part in the economy and you only want to focus on socialist handouts, it is at that point that you have left the realm of realism and you're talking in ideals, right? So for today's debate, for benefits to actually realize, we have to understand the mechanism of how companies actually work and how this stack actually comes about and how this investment actually play out, and then see how you inject the socialist elements into this capitalist economy to create a mixed economy. So a little bit of clarification before we get into it, right? So a few rebuttals from member of Gov from CG, right? So they come out and they say, oh, look, opposition is only saying stuff like, oh, if you send a good curiosity rover to Mars, then you get a microchip. But think about this, right? What if I told you 20 years ago, look, I'm going to spend millions and millions, maybe even billions, but somehow I'm going to turn a crop that now only gives you like 50 calories into something that gives you 150, 200 calories. You will say that's bullshit. That's not going to happen. But that's what GMOs are. GMOs are things that have substantially benefited poor people, substantially benefited agriculture, substantially benefited mankind. At the point in which you remain short-sighted and only want to spend all your money on welfare benefits and only want to spend all your money on handouts, we tell you you'll never actualize and accrue benefits such as we can accrue on our side, because if you do not see it in the short run, doesn't mean it won't accrue in the long run. And that's why the bulk of my case will be here today. Why is it worth it for a government to have the far-sightedness, the long-sightedness, instead of just focusing on a short-sighted version in today's economy, right? Another thing is that they kept telling us that only rich people can access, but that's actually worse than your side, you know? At the point in which you remove the government's hand in the workings of this company, you removed any investment, you remove any buy-in, you remove any say in the government's, the company's pricing, the company's output and all that. Isn't it at that point that you make it more inaccessible? Isn't it at that point that you give these companies the leeway and say that, look, we do not give a shit about you, therefore you can only recoup all your investment costs in terms of profits, and therefore go ahead, price it however you want. We tell you that in the event that Earth is fucked, right? Like there's no Earth anymore. At the point at which we need to send people out of, like, theoretical, but yeah, say SpaceX works. You need to send people out of space. If the government had invested heavily in SpaceX can get a directive from the government saying that, look, let people on for $10, not $10 billion. That is what we want today. We do not want a world where this tech actually realizes, where the human condition actualizes, and the chance is there, but people miss out on it because it is inaccessible. Because we have let this creature be born of capitalist mechanisms without the socialist element, and therefore we lose any say in making it accessible for people. So let's get into my argument, the uni extension coming out from site closing opposition, right? That how this far-sightedness actually plays out in terms of provision of services. Now look at Silicon Valley. It is a place which is practically a desert where the US government, no thank you, Calvin, where the US government practically created an incubator for these tech companies that were basically fairy tales to come out with the tech that we can't live without today, right? It is at the point in which the government recognized that, look, I will give you a space, I will give you tax exemptions, I will give you incentives, I will give you financial assistance, grow, and the point in which they financially bought in, and they have a stake in that, at the point in which they are able to say that, look, your progress was also because of what I gave you. It is at that point that tech became accessible to Americans. It is at that point that tech or the Silicon Valley became such a leader in the industry, and therefore America managed to accrue the benefits of being the host country to the development of this tech. No, thank you, Governor. So, at the point at which we tell you they are so dependent on government policy, they're very easily skittish. So, at the point at which the government does not give them the suitable environment to grow their economy, grow their industry, what happens? You could have the key to solving civilization's problems. What happens? That patent just gets thrown away because the scientist who has no commercial sense, right, can't recoup get together private investors to start a company. It is at that point that the government needs to step in and say, look, I think you have something going on. I will give you the money, start up, see where this goes. If it goes more, I will buy in. The only condition is at the point in which you actualize this tech, you are answerable and accountable to me, and therefore you get to keep your capitalist profits, but you also have to play by the socialist elements that I put in, because I can do that to you because I gave you the money in the first place. So that is what a mixed economy shared pension looks like, and that is what we want, right? So at the point at which they keep saying they want short-sightedness, they want to give provision of services, they want to give benefits, welfare and all that, right? We tell you it is a completely invalid point and a moot point, because under no circumstances can they cater to every homeless person in the state. Under no circumstances can they cater to every person who needs handouts, right? What happens then? Then it is a purely socialist state, and history has told us that doesn't work, right? You need a capitalist economy to sustain yourself. At the point in which they want to run this theoretical extreme, right? We tell you it does not work. Yes, sir.
How is it morally justified to let a kid continue to be malnourished on a chance that your GMO experiment is successful?
Yeah.
Surely keeping them alive is more important.
How morally justified is it to spend that money on keeping that generation of people alive when you missed out on the chance to feed 6 generations in the future? That is what we tell you today. And it's not in the extremes that they want to talk about, right? So I wouldn't be investing so much in GMOs if I had literally no money, right? Only if I saw a plausible chance in success would I do that. So we tell you that it need not be immediate, the improvement of improvement of the human condition. But as long as there's a chance, we will invest in it, because we get it accessible, and we get it sustainable, and we get it available to people. Something that they can never actualize, right? And then they keep harping on this fact that, oh, we need to provide welfare, we need to create a better no thank you, Wesley. So we need to create better welfare. The state owes an obligation to provide welfare. But here's the question becomes, what is welfare? Welfare is the total living condition of a person, of a citizen, of the voter that voted you in. You owe an obligation, not only to that voter, to every citizen in your country, to improve his human condition, improve his living condition. At the point in which you have the foresight to say that, look, I might go through the short-run political disincentive, short-run political backlash, whatnot, right? And I'm willing to put my neck out to create a world where you can drive around with GPS, where you can eat GMO, where you can live a sustainable lifestyle. We tell you at that point, the obligation is better justified because you went the extra leg to create a more meaningful form of welfare instead of a short-term socialist handout that will only create disincentives in your capitalist economy. So, that's it. Why mess with the beautiful system that we have, right? In the short run, you create jobs. In the long run, you create tech. Why is that such a big deal? And then The last part, right? You can never become a leader in an industry if you insist on buying in after the industry is grown, right? The only point you can become a leader in industry and have the strategic benefit is at the point in which you buy in at the beginning and grow the industry at home. We tell you, we have the strategic benefit on our side. We take care of our people in the short run and the long run. I'll be proud of the oppose.
I think the room for speech. Another call for the government.
In a complex world today where we have paradoxes of choices, where we have unlimited creativity, we have unlimited solutions, but which one to prioritize? In this spectrum of issues that humans face, our end goal is to save the ones that's thrown under the bus, the one who is sidelined, the one who's discriminated, marginalized, because no one gets left behind in this issue, where if one side of the world who has the resources and asset to move to Mars, why can't the other can also move along? Why does the other have to be left behind and trade off as an expense for the betterment of other people so that these people's generation, future kids could enjoy, but these at the present moment people suffer? So what we come up from this debate is, before that, I'm gonna just rebut the whole opposition bench side, because opposition bench, they kind of closely only differ in terms of their view from capitalistic economic lens. But however, their principal justification and benefits that accrue under there are all quite similar. So first of all, I'm going to tackle it. We see from this government and bench say that creativity in solving issues is not a mutually exclusive benefit, because under our side, creativity happens, but because you focus, you put on more people who in the think tank to focus on issues, social issues, instead of focusing on, exploration and everything like that. So if you have more focus on this issue, you have more people working on, you can solve problems that have tangible harms now, that if you can't solve now, you can't even think about the future. So first of all, that is the reason why many issues nowadays, they do not get priority, because they are sidelined, they are marginalized, viewed as not important because they have bigger priorities to serve humanity, whereas they should actually focus on the one that's left behind. So they're not solving any issues, they're actually creating more issues, because when more innovation comes into this world, there are more problems that come out of their harms come up from your innovations. Straws to actually last time help people, now they're polluting the world. Who knows? And last time, your benefits of having like Volkswagen or something, that car to actually help, cannot be accessible. That's an issue. Sorry, not too early. That's an issue in this debate called the issue of accessibility, where we argue that in your world, opposition bench world, accessibility doesn't come to all types of people. It only happens under people where they are privileged, because when there is monetary value in that solution, becomes a capitalistic asset, people would actually monetize that issue and only save it for the parts of people who can afford to have that solution, whereas people could not afford, will be totally out of the question. There will be like trade-offs that severely need to be under compensated.
Yeah, how can these companies completely monetize it at the point at which the government owns a significant stake and is partial in this company?
Because when you transfer that, anything that has value, profit value, anything that can increase its value, private companies will totally latch onto that stake interest. When it has stake, people will totally utilize it to serve the interest of other people. It keeps hidden from the public eye. There's a conspiracy, a lot like vaccinations, virus out there to hurt other people, and this is not really relevant. So no, thank you. So this is how we tackle down the issue of accessibility and creativity, innovation that side opposition should have defended. So moving on to the, one thing for sure is side closing is a bit too far. They are in Mars. They totally throw the marginalized people under the bus. Let's take, for example, in Africa. There's innovation where you have bucket, people transfer water from the river, they pull out buckets and everything, right? But that does not solve the core issue of that country. The core issue is poverty, how people are being hurt under systematic discriminations, under structural violence, all these harms that are not solved because they're not giving the value, the priority that needs to be given. So this all innovation does not help in the end if the environment itself if they are living in is toxic. So feasibility is not an issue of the debate. This okay, yeah.
So like, I think the government has to accept that the benefits that they can accrue in the future is going to be huge. Then only the debate can be fair. But assuming your worst case scenario, right? Governments will have to spend more money to try to equalize access to the poor. At least in our world, if they own it now, they can control prices, they can prevent monopolies. Don't you think that's better?
I think our alternative is much more saving cost friendly and much more immediate rather than your future benefits that, you know, based on assumptions and trend analysis and statistics that would actually go down the drain, and a lot of factors will actually mitigate it, and it could not happen. So these are all my rebuttals. So moving on, there are actually two clashes that I identify. Why is this segregation more efficient? And second of all, who in this debate can solve all types of spectrum of issues better? So first of all, principally why we should actually have this segregation is because, first of all, we have the government to focus totally on the aspects of how to, you know, generate more better education, welfare, healthcare in three different spectrum: politically, socially, economy. They need not to actually focus on you know, gaining popularity votes, because they have to gain popularity votes because the taxpayers come from middle class people, and these middle class people are usually people who are actually pinched most in the society. So they should be given an imperative in this debate. So there are three reasons why. First, because we have the private. The private companies can actually, you know, help for future generation. And I'm sure in this capitalistic society, there are a lot of private companies that actually would competitively fight. So second of all, lives cannot be weighed. No, a day you put on hold is a day alive. Tens of million lives are sacrificed. And we believe that coming from side government, we have the higher moral ground. Third of all is your world create more problems and more side effects that need to be solved, and it does not solve the initial ancient archive problems and not solved in the first place. So practically, benefits of segregation is more areas of social issues are covered, saves time, cost, and energy, specifically targets the marginalized, and have the privileged people highlighted, and they could actually create more awareness to spark discourses, because now when you focus totally entirely on these issues, they are going to be discussed. Why governments are not allowed to be, you know, branching out is because there are core issues that needed to be highlighted in this world, which always gets hidden from view. So this is how we principally justify, and we give you practical benefits that come out with this. And in political, corruption can actually be solved. Corruption issues that you know, that political people take from tokenistic values, they could actually propagate that we need to focus on this could not come under our house, because we totally take out the narrative. So politically, socially, in the economy, we solve the paradoxes of choice. This is very proud to propose.
I think of it. Last for the house. You're able to